Hi BookTube and welcome to a new video. This is going to be the worst books I've ever read. Now the first thing to say is I sort of hang on to my books, although periodically I do run out of space and I have to do a purge and I take books down to the charity shop. So when I came to compile this list, what I didn't realise is I only actually still own 3 of the 11, that 8 of them have been purged. And the other thing to say is a lot of these books contain similar failings in that they're political novels, and politics in novels is quite hard to do for a variety of reasons, but these singularly fail spectacularly. Anyway, as I don't own the books, most of them, to hold up, I'm going to periodically refer to my list on my laptop, so please excuse diving off to the left like this. So the first book is Solar by Ian McEwan. Now, I'm generally, or I was, a McEwan fan. Quite liked books like Atonement and Saturday. Is there one called Nutshell on Chesil Beach? But Solar was the book that sort of gradually broke my bond with him, so that I've not really kept up with his sort of more recent output. I've not read any of them. And so Solar is about a physics professor working in a sort of environmental, preserving the planet sphere, only there's very little of that in the book. And he's a sort of monstrous character. Now, it's all very well to portray monsters and have them front and central to your novel, but they have to have something about them that keeps you vested in them. Is it their ingeniousness? Is it their value system that sort of you can see where it's come from? Is it that they're cynics? Is it that they're funny? Now, what we get in the case of Beard, who's this professor, is that he's just a buffoon. He sort of manages to sort of piss everybody around him off, from the local tradesman to his own family. And it's a bad book when the author gathers all the characters that he's pissed off into a sort of final showdown with him in America. So they've all been transported from the UK by various specious reasons and motivations. To gather where he is at a conference in the US to confront him or stage an intervention. It's just awful. It's pathetic. Okay, book number 10 is the first of the political failures. This is Demo by Alison Miller, and it starts off on a political demonstration against the Iraq War. And I myself have written a book called Not in My Name, which features a demonstration as one of its central scenes, and I take a lot of pages to describe, because a demonstration by definition is a long parade, so there's lots of stuff happening at every sort of section of that parade. Alison Miller doesn't give you any of that. It's sort of dashed off very briefly, and then the rest of the book is about bourgeois trustafarians who were on this demo. But it's about their sexual hang-ups and their sexual jealousies. One of the women is pregnant by one of the men, but she's no longer in love with him. And the rest of the book is about these sort of, sexual whatever. I mean, it's just laughable, quite honestly. It has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with protesting war when virtually the whole population is against something, but the government still go ahead and do it. So a missed opportunity, I feel. And the next one is Doris Lessing, The Good Terrorist. Now, Doris Lessing's a very good writer. And in the 1970s and 80s, when she's writing this, or when this is set, there were, particularly in London, sort of communes and sort of cells of extreme, on the whole left, politics, political groups who sort of believed in Marxism and Leninism and Maoism, and anarchists who sort of threatened to dabble with sort of terrorist tactics. And indeed, one of those sort of Marxist-Leninist communes actually was later revealed to be a cult, where the cult leader, used his sort of Marxist-Leninist analysis of things to keep enslaved about 4 women. So there is an interesting subject there, but the way Doris Lessing treated it is just everything is caricatured. She obviously has no respect or no real interest in this phenomena. And if the author doesn't have respect for all the characters that she's portraying, then why should the reader? And it's just a real missed opportunity because you gain no insight. As I say, it's just cartoonish sort of left-wing terrorism. Really, really poor. Which is surprising because, as I say, she's a good author. And on to Richard Yates by Tao Lin. So the problem, and I find this in films particularly, the problem with stories or portraying ennui is that they're boring to watch, they're boring to consume, they're boring to read. And Tao Lin provides us with two characters, one who's a middle-list writer, the other who's his teenage girlfriend, and their language is completely degraded, which I think is his point. It's about the degradation of language. But it makes their communications, their dialogue, absolutely desultory. There's just nothing of redemptive value in this book. It's boring to read. They're not very interesting characters. While it starts off tender, they're sort of exploring each other and getting to know each other. It soon turns into the man controlling the woman, but not out of... It's almost... I described it at the time as... It's like when you lift up a rock and you see all these insects exposed to the light and they start scurrying around, and you poke a stick in the ground to make them change direction. It's sort of like that. But its biggest crime is just how desultory it is to read and how desultory the characters are, and it you know, it's absolutely aimless. Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melko. Now, this is a really popular book. It's 4 stars on Goodreads, with having had over... I can't remember, was it about 40,000 ratings, something like that. But I have to say that my review of it, which was a 1-star review, has had 55 likes, and the average review I get, if it gets any likes at all, is between 3 and 4. So this is significantly the most sort of agreed upon, I suppose, or review that I've posted on Goodreads. So Hurricane Season is about sort of Mexican rural life, which is sort of driving poverty, and the framing is that a murder of the local witch has happened, and there's a twist as to the character of the witch, which I won't spoil. Although I'll spoil by saying don't bother reading this book. The problem with the book is it's of one tone throughout, of run-on sentences, no paragraph breaks, and that tone is shrill. Men hate women, women hate men, children hate parents, parents hate children, everyone's a puta or a son of a whore. And yes, it's grinding poverty, it does that to people, I get it. But you need some sort of shade as a reader, shade and light. And of course that would destroy her thesis about grinding poverty. So as I say, you just get this one long shrill set of people condemning other people and being nasty to people, and it's remorseless, and it's just unreadable to me anyway. As a reading experience, there's just nothing to be gained whatsoever. One of the books I actually do own, Hangman by Binyamin. So again, this was a really popular book. It was a debut novel. It got on a prize list, I think, for women's fiction, but maybe it was international. I can't remember. And it's about a 55-year-old man somewhere from a country somewhere in the Middle East who was imprisoned there for his views and was let out and took the first opportunity to flee the borders and live elsewhere. And he's had a communication that his brother is dying, and can he go back and visit him? So he's going back to his old country for the first time in many years, and he doesn't really have a plan. He doesn't have anywhere to stay sort of booked up in advance. He thinks, well, through a sort of familiarity with my old country, plus the fact I still have relatives there, I'll be fine. So he goes over, and then what we get is this sort of aimless drift from one situation to another. There are lots of pleasant, nice people in the country that he meets, but he's really passive. They're all talking at him, they're all lecturing him, they're all giving him their views. So a charity worker talks about sort of colonialism. 2 students talk to him, they're arguing over history, whether it's about sort of revolutionary change or whether everything stays the same. So those sorts of arguments are very much sort of pitched at high school level. You know, they're not sophisticated arguments. As I say, he's so passive. he's gradually stripped of his possessions, of his clothes, and he's reclothed in sort of charitable donated clothes. So the point is he's been broken down. But there's nothing to break down because he's offered nothing to anybody else in the book. So you don't really care that he's broken down, because this is not a tragic waste of a human life, because this human life has already seemed to have spent itself. And on to Death of Binyamin Monroe by Nick Cave. So Nick Cave's first book, And the Ass Saw an Angel, was really well written, very derivative. It was a mixture of sort of Southern Gothic with sort of heavy biblical overtones. But it's good. I mean, Cave can pen songs and he can also write good prose. This was his follow-up, and as about a priapic salesman, travelling salesman, who sells beauty products. And while his potential customers sample the products, he samples them between the sheets. And his infidelity has driven his wife to suicide. And he is beset periodically by these sort of ghosts and sort of nightmarish visions to make him feel guilty or express his guilt. But at other times he's able to shake them off without any sort of difficulty whatsoever. And he's travelling the road with his 9-year-old son, but his 9-year-old son is in absolute awe of him. So he's not going to get any insight or provocation from his son, because his son is just a lickspittle to him. It's just awful. It's misogynist. The character work is lousy. It just sort of fails on every single level. Conversations with Friends by Sully Rooney. Well, I have an hour-long video on this, which I will post the link to, so I won't go into that level of detail, except to say, for the first half of this book, I found myself line editing it, because it was that annoying. The character work is dire. It drops sort of heavy philosophy in when the rest of the book is sort of trying to be anti-intellectual. It's just a mass of contradictions. And the thing is, I didn't understand. It didn't seem to be written for me, which is fine when you read a book where you just think, that's not for me. But when it's not written for you, that seems more of a problem, because you should be writing for everyone, even if it doesn't hit with everyone. And, you know, she's been called, and maybe this isn't her fault, maybe this is sort of more to do with their sort of marketing and PR. She's been called the voice of the millennial generation, which, if that's the case, then no wonder I felt excluded. But even with that, I couldn't understand quite what her point of attack was here. The characters here are so thoroughly unlikable as millennials. Is this a battle cry to millennials saying, come on, snap out of it, you know, engage with real life? In which case, why is she so popular? Or is it just that her millennial audience feels seen because someone's writing about them? Yeah, they are, but they don't show you in a good light. I just couldn't get my head round quite what this book was going to do. But for the fuller line edit problems of this book, I'll post the link to my original review. Asylum by Patrick McGrath. So this is, along with D.M. Thomas's The White Hotel, which is a book I think from the 80s. I'm not sure when McGrath's book was, I should have looked that up. But anyway, it's one of those books that's just misogynist from beginning to end. And while you got away with it in the 80s, at least you got away with it in the sense it would be happily published and promoted, you can't do that anymore, and quite rightly. So a psychiatrist and his wife, the psychiatrist has got a new job in this insane asylum for the criminally insane. And obviously his wife goes with him, and they move into a property on the estate. And she's bored out of her mind because he's off all day dealing with patients. And eventually she sort of starts an affair with one of the patients. And he's playing her. And it's through her, whether consciously or unconsciously, he escapes. And he leaves word for her that she's to join him. So he escapes to London, and she does. She slips away from the asylum, and she hooks up with this guy. He's insane. He's criminally insane, so she does not get treated well. And he goes on the run because they're catching up with him. And so she's left completely bereft. What should she do? Where should she go? So, of course, she goes back to her husband. Only the asylum opens an investigation into her part in helping this guy escape. So she's treated really sort of aggressively and sort of badly. And then her husband starts punishing because he loses his job through this and can only get a kind of crappy psychiatrist job at some sort of rural outpost. So they move up there, and he punishes her for it by the way he treats her. She does something awful because she's so sort of put upon by the way her husband's treating, so that she ends up in the asylum, and the guy who interrogated her about the other guy's escape is now her therapist, and he falls in love with her. It's just, the point about the White Hotel was it was male fantasy, or it was a male writer writing a supposed female fantasy, which was about SA. I have to acronymise that because of YouTube, which reeked to me of a man, completely projecting his own fantasy upon a woman character. And here McGrath is just treating this poor woman like a rag doll, just putting her through one humiliation and suffering after another. Absolutely terrible book. So 2 to go. The Power by Naomi Alderman, another highly touted book. She was mentored by Margaret Atwood. This is feminist sci-fi, apparently. The one redeeming feature it has, it does a really interesting thing with time, which I won't spoil. But other than that, it's a very curious notion of what feminist sci-fi would look like. So the first thing is, women have they can give like electric shocks. They have a sort of an extra gland near their clavicle. And when they touch somebody, it gives them an electric shock. Now that not sort of naturally begins to turn the power balance between men and women. So the first thing is that Alderman shows that if women were, the power brokers rather than men, that the women would act just as badly as men have throughout history, that they're no better than men. So that's a curious notion of feminism. The second thing is that men obviously resist their sort of losing power. And there are 2 main battlefields around the globe. One is Saudi Arabia, picked because obviously the second-class citizenship of women under that regime. And the other is Moldova, because it's one of the hubs of trafficking of women for the sex work. And from a sort of geopolitical point of view, I found that potty, that I didn't think Moldova was significant enough to be the central focus of a war between men and women. I'm not sure Saudi is as well, but that kind of makes slightly more sense because the Saudis at least have money, whereas Moldova's one of the poorest countries in Europe, if not the poorest. So that didn't make any sense. And then we get to the characters. So we have a female politician in Washington who's very Machiavellian and, like I say, women behaving just as badly as men. We get a woman, and the main voice, who it turns out is schizophrenic, and she's sort of having this sort of schizophrenic dialogue throughout the book. But what's really upsetting is she reveals that the reason that she's got a broken mind is because she was abused by her father, or her stepfather, I can't remember now, but it was at the behest of the mother or the stepmother. It was the stepmother's doing. She was guiding the hands of the father, which I think is an appalling notion. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but to write a supposedly feminist science fiction, have all your characters flawed, and then show that the flaw is largely due to women before this sort of revolutionary power kicked in. It's just horrendous. Yeah, absolutely terrible book. And the worst book I've ever read, Ghost War by Sarah Moss. Another incredibly popular book, another incredibly popular author. I don't get it. I really don't get it. So this modern family decide they're going to sort of take a break from modern living, and they're going to live back in primitive times, which is all very well, but you can hear the sounds of the cars on the motorway when you're in your yurt or whatever, that the children steal away to the local shop to get sweets and stuff. So it's a flawed concept from the beginning, which is fair. She's portraying it as flawed, so that's absolutely fair enough. But the character work is just awful. The father is this sort of racist bully, always sort of berating his wife, who's just tired all the time. Hardly surprising. All she wants, her biggest pleasure in life is to have the chance to sit down. The father has this mate he's brought along. But the main narrator is this teenage daughter. And she's supposed to be sympathetic, given the character, given who her parents are. But she's surprisingly not sympathetic. And the other thing about the book is Moss can't seem to decide which mythology she wants to embrace. Is it a sort of primitive bog people, or is it the Romans, the ghosts of the Roman legion that used to be there, who built what was called a ghost wall of skulls to sort of scare their enemies and keep ghosts out? She sort of keeps flipping from one to the other. And dilutes the power of both because it's unfocused. It's just, I think it's a political book in that she's trying to portray the sort of right-wing, macho, toxic masculinity, Brexit voting sort of mentality in the form of the father. But he's such a caricature. He's so two-dimensional that as an argument, it's beyond credibility because it's just risible. The whole book is risible. So there you have it. The worst books I've ever read. A lot of them, as I say, quite popular. So I'm really intrigued as to your responses in the comments below. I will post links, as I say, to some of them, to my fuller reviews, particularly the Sally Rooney, probably to Ghost Wall, maybe one or two of the others. If you want slightly more detail on them. But I will say, I would never tell anyone what not to read, but my advice is steer clear of all of these books. Okay, thanks. Till next time.